Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. And on this episode, we dive into the 2019 Wave 2 feature set for Dynamics 365 Business Central with some help from Microsoft Group Program Manager Chad Sogge and Microsoft MVP and Chief Operating Officer of Dynamics Southwest AJ Ansari. The timing of the discussion couldn't be better as the 2019 release Wave 2 just became generally available and the newest Business Central features and enhancements are now open to new customers. Chad explains the 5 key areas in which his team has delivered updates to Business Central, and he also dives into some of the issues that partners and customers will be watching for as these updates roll out. Improving the upgrade and migration tools is top of mind, and so is the story about extensions, development, and support, both as it relates to compatibility with AppSource apps and other custom extensions. It's a potentially big change for existing Business Central customers, and the timing there is critical. Also up for discussion in this episode are topics including customer support, running multiple production instances in a single tenant, and submitting new ideas to the product team. This episode of the MSDW podcast is sponsored by ClickLearn. ClickLearn is the market-leading solution for creating user instructions, e-learning, and process videos for business software. ClickLearn will automate writing your business-critical walkthroughs, saving you 80% of the time you now spend creating them manually for Dynamics 365 Business Central, Finance and Operations, Customer Engagement, and most of your other IT systems. The ClickLearn solution produces your walkthroughs in 8 different formats from a single source, including written documentation, hands-on labs, videos with automated effects, and voiceover. On top of that, ClickLearn has a virtual assistant that guides the users within the live system. Simply record your work process in Dynamics. With one click, ClickLearn produces your walkthroughs in all formats and in more than 45 languages and 135 dialects. It creates a complete e-learning portal with full tracking and scoring and upgrades your work instructions as you upgrade your Dynamics platform with no manual effort on your part. I have with me Chad Sogge and AJ Ansari. So Chad, welcome to you to the podcast. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
And AJ, welcome back. You are, I think, officially a returning MSDW podcast contributor now.
Thank you. It's always an honor.
And this is a pretty big day. We're recording this just after the Wave 2 2019 release of Business Central has kind of gone live and is open for new customer signups today. So, Chad, congratulations on your team reaching that milestone.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a pretty major milestone for us. We're really proud of the work that has gone into this version of Business Central, and I think as we go through today's podcast, we're going to share a lot of that information about what's there, and it really will help both partners and customers in their journey with Business Central across multiple areas of the product. So I'm very excited. The team is very excited, and we're ready to go. We're ready for everybody to use it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is the start of kind of a very active month of events and information sharing. Glad that we get a chance to learn from you directly here. There have been blog posts kind of in the run-up to this release, and maybe we can start by just kind of reviewing some of the fundamental changes in the release. Probably some of our listeners already understand what they are, but it would probably be good to just sort of set that baseline. So the preview for Release Wave 2 came out about 4 weeks ago or so, so people have sort of been able to get their hands on it. But Chad, I mean, what should people know as sort of the most important things that make this release important?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you're absolutely correct. We had a preview. That's a model we've been trying to go to across our entire organization, from Power Platform to Business Central to Finance and Operations, where we a little bit ahead of the GA time, we give a preview so that customers can try it out, partners can try it out, and see what's coming very shortly and get a feeling for it. So when we look at our Wave 2 release for Business Central, there's 5 key areas or themes that we built and that we focused on for this release. So I'll go through those 5 and talk about some of the features and some of the areas within those 5 themes that we addressed. But again, there are over 100 new features in this 6 months worth of work for our team. So it's a pretty extensive release. You're going to certainly want to be able to study that out on the roadmap site, on the release notes. There's several areas, or even just bringing up the product, bringing up the service, and trying it out. But the 5 themes that we worked on, the first was service fundamentals. And in the service fundamentals, what we wanted to do is continue our focus from the last semester on the performance, the reliability, supportability, and security that is absolutely essential to running a service at the scale that Business Central runs at. And so we have really doubled down in those particular areas. We've looked at some of the performance areas that we can tune, whether it be transaction entry, whether it be having multiple apps against your service, whether it be clusters, that we have shared clusters, and how do we work through any sort of noisy neighbor type of solutions and enhance the overall performance before the customer sees that. We have telemetry on the back end that can then say we need to amp up their particular service for their needs. So service fundamentals was one of the most important areas of our team and what we focused on as the first theme of this particular version or release. The second was around the modern client work. And we started to do this work, and we even previewed a lot of that new modern client for the web client back in the spring version or wave 1 version. We took that effort and we said, okay, it is now time. We've gotten far enough on this, and over the next 6-month period, we're going to get to a point where we no longer support the Windows client. So those of you that have used the Windows client for on-prem, because again, Business Central for us is a deployment option for you as a client. You can go with a hosted solution hosted by Microsoft, or you can have it as an on-prem solution and use it within your own environment. We offered the Windows client up until this release, and in this release, everything has gone into the web client. We have a very, very rich, strong browser-based client that has some really, really interesting usability features, has a new look and feel, and it just is it's a world-class experience for those users. But not only do we have that in the web browser, but you can get that in our mobile apps, both Android and iOS, as well as what we have for the Outlook client, where you can interact with and use Business Central. So the modern client was our second major theme that we invested in for Wave 2. Thirdly was our continued path on the modern developer tools. So we have a strong, rich history with this product line and the underpinnings of the platform from the NAV era of things with CAL. We spent a considerable amount of time the last couple of years introducing the extension methodology, and so calling events. Far less on the code customization. In fact, we don't want code customization. We want people to use extensions and call events because that makes it so much easier to update every time we have a monthly release or every time we have a major wave like the one we're talking about right now. So we have gone strictly to AL. We have gone away from our CALRC side, and we're into modern tools. We're into Visual Studio Code with Azure DevOps. We're into an AL language, and we are moving more and more with our cloud solution, with a hosted solution. It is extensions only. With on-prem, you can still choose to do code customization and bring those along to some degree, but you're on the path of having to convert those to AL, and then eventually you're going to need them as extensions, whether that be an extension from an ISV off of AppSource, or whether that be a per-tenant extension that your partner can build. And part of why we're doing this, not part of why we're doing this, the big reason we're doing this is really we want to embrace the next 30 years. We want this service to be modern. We want new developers that are coming out of college or new in career to be able to pick this up and to use tools that they know, tools that are not proprietary. Do the VS Code tooling, use AL, and really enhance and broaden the capabilities and the number of people that know how to enhance Business Central. And so that is one of the areas. The other area is really taking and creating a separation from platform and client and having modules that we can ship at different times, services that we can ship at different times, so that you as the customer realize the value in a faster way with monthly cadence than we have traditionally done in the past. Our fourth area, our fourth theme, was to empower the ISV acceleration. And what we mean by that is we have historically done a lot or had a lot of business through our what we call embed ISVs. So those ISVs that have a vertical solution, whether it be retail, whether it be automotive, anything that really is deep in vertical in need or in usage, we have made it easier. We've brought more capabilities to their development and more of their ability to bring the on-prem customers to a SaaS solution that they can run on our service. And this has been a major focal point for us. We have heard from customers that want to move to SaaS. We've heard from these ISVs that have vertical solutions that want to move to a SaaS environment. And with this version of our service, that is certainly able to be done. And we have many of the ISVs that we've worked closely with over the last semester to bring them to this service now. So you're going to want to check that out. And then the fifth area that was a central theme for us was our migration tooling. This is an area we have been developing against, but we really doubled down, particularly on the Business Central side or the NAV side, and bringing existing customers to the SaaS solution through our migration tooling. A semester ago, we introduced the Intelligent Cloud Insights, and the idea was that we could run, or you could run on-prem, and then leverage machine learning, leverage AI, and then when you were ready, you could turn off your on-prem instance because it was duplicated in the cloud. We got a lot of feedback when we rolled that out, particularly for the NAV customers, that they were using that as a migration tool. The partners were using it as a migration tool. But it wasn't designed in that version to be 100% of a migration tool. So we have put the effort in. We've added many other tables. We've added templates. We've added a lot of things that make it a true migration tool. So if you want to move from your on-prem solution, in this version, you'd have to upgrade to Business Central, to the 2019 Wave 2 Business Central on-prem, and then you click on the migration and you move it over to your SaaS solution. So we will continue that work. We'll continue to enhance the migration tooling. But again, for 2019 Wave 2, it was around those 5 areas: service fundamentals, the modern client, modern developer tools, empower the ISV acceleration, and our migration tooling. Those were the key components that we focused on from an engineering standpoint.
All right. Well, that's it. I guess we're that's great. Thank you for that. That summary. A couple of some of those I definitely I guess expected or thought you were going to talk about. The migration tools is really interesting. Just as a first reaction, that you've made so much progress on those. That's I think I don't know, AJ. Let me put that to you. Is that having that ability to talk about the move from on-prem to cloud migrations with new tooling, is that already interesting for companies in your position, for partners?
Yeah, that's so I feel like it will be more interesting. Today, the conversations that we're having, it's more around customers who are coming from another solution and they're on a legacy platform that's more on premises. And I think our conversations are around, do they want to go onto Business Central on premises because that option is there, or would they like to go to cloud? We thought that conversation would continue to move towards on premises for at least the short term, but in great numbers, in very large numbers we're seeing, and that's represented in our sales cycle for this year, very large numbers choose cloud over on premises. In fact, only one of our customers in the last 12 months have chosen the on premises version of Business Central. That to us is a good leading indicator of the conversations that will happen with our existing customers when it comes time to upgrade. A lot of our customers on older versions of Dynamics Nav tend to be upgrading once every 3 years or so. It's just going to happen that way, both because of the perceived cost to upgrade, right? Traditionally, as we wrote our code in CAL in the traditional model, It meant there were changes to the base code, and therefore every time you upgraded, that technical debt that you incurred got repaid every few years, and companies would defer that to the extent possible. Now, I think when we're talking about when we do talk to our customers, as more of them come up to against upgrade cycles, that conversation will happen. All right, you're on Dynamics Nav today. You're going to move to obviously a version of Dynamics 365 Business Central, but both paths are available, and one path will not necessarily be much more difficult than the other. It seems like a natural transition. So the more Microsoft simplifies that process of getting existing customers to the cloud, the easier that conversation will be for us. I'll add one last thing too on this topic. About a year and a half ago, appear in the partner community when I think Business Central was first launched, posted something on LinkedIn about how moving to the cloud was like the push of a button. It's like the Staples It's Easy button. And I remember thinking back then, well, not quite there, right? And no, it's not that. Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves. But we are getting closer to that type of vision with every release that we have. I'm sure some customers will have a slightly tougher path if you've significantly customized your system, if I will. But I think for the vast majority, I think that path to moving to the cloud, it becomes easier with tools like these.
Yeah, I would just add, when it comes to upgrade, I feel like, and Chad, I don't know if you're hearing this as well, but more analysts and more people like AJ, consultants and solution architects and so forth, trying to put their foot down a bit more and demand more out of the vendors like Microsoft and others. This is not aimed just at Microsoft, really ERP in general, that upgrades and migration to the cloud, to the latest version of a product that they've been on for maybe a few years, it should be easier. That the vendor should be carrying more of that weight. Do you hear more demands like that, Chad?
Yeah, it's a very good point. We do hear more of the demands of that, and that is really why we architected Business Central the way we did. Is the long-term vision of, I won't go quite as far as saying a not event, but it should be a very minimal event to do an upgrade or an update is actually what we'd like to call it. So when Wave 2 comes out, the update should be pretty seamless. Now we're going through some technology change in this one to set ourselves up better for the future. But from that point forward, we have commitments to non-breaking changes. We have commitments to a deprecation scheme that allows a 1-year cycle of notification before it's deprecated. And so those are the paths that we're taking, and that's what customers are demanding. They see this in all of the other applications that they're using, certainly on a personal side, and that application simplicity of, let's just say, an iPhone, where your app is just updated each time. I understand it's not the complexity of an ERP solution by any means, but it's the way that we've been using apps and the way we think about apps and the way we think about doing things in our personal life that is starting to really blend over to our business life and saying, okay, well, how simple can it be? I would like to update. I would like to have the most current functionality. In fact, maybe I even want the option to turn it off and on, but allow me that option. Go ahead and give it to me and then make it an easy switch that I can turn on and try something. And that's why we have things like sandboxes. That's why we have notifications of upcoming updates so that you can schedule them during a time frame that makes sense for that business. And that's why we're making commitments as we move forward now to our deprecation schemes and to our non-breaking changes.
Jason, one thing that I was thinking about as a partner in our relationship with Microsoft, Microsoft being the publisher in this relationship, there are times we can be very critical of that relationship, and there are times we will be critical, and there are times we have to acknowledge the things that Microsoft is doing right. Over the last few releases, I think I should really commend Chad and the team on putting out these pre-release notes in very detailed fashion. So if you've been on Microsoft Docs over the last few months, you would have seen exactly, or not exactly, but to a great extent, what was going to be expected in Wave 2. I realize there's a lot of risk because if you do promise something and it doesn't come through, regardless of how many safe harbor statements you put in there, clauses you put in there, people will still be a little unhappy that maybe a feature or function that they were looking for didn't make the cut. But as a partner, we find this really allows us to start preparing ourselves better. That, in conjunction with preview builds, allows us to test these things out. And as much as I realize for a publisher, those wow reveals at a trade show, they're phenomenal. I do think customers and partners alike really appreciate having an idea of what's coming down the pipeline. Also seeing how some of the feedback that they're providing is making the cut into a product as it improves. So just from a non-technical perspective, I think that's been a really good addition. In the past, a roadmap was simply a slide, if you will, that talked in very broad theme points. If I were to summarize everything Chad said early on in this podcast, he summarized that in 5 bullet points. I think we would get something to the extent of those 5 bullet points on a roadmap slide as to what we would expect, and everything else was kind of more of a mystery. I think here we're seeing a lot more openness, and I think the community is better off for it.
Yeah, it's a great point you make, AJ, and this is something that our leadership team, our CVP level leadership team, felt pretty passionate about as well, and we've implemented over the last couple of semesters. And it's an interesting balancing act with our engineering team here to say, all right, a few months ahead, we're going to tell everybody what's in there. Well, you better be sure, right? And you better make sure that you have the capacity to do that, that you know what you're going to be doing, but you still want to maintain that aggressive edge and push the team and push a little harder. So the way we approach that is we work through a few of the areas and then we put out the release notes. So, for example, the next release that we will have release notes for will be Wave 1 2020. And the first version of that will go public is probably towards the end of the calendar year. So that gives us a couple of months to really get started and be pretty confident in what we're delivering. And then we do revise that as we go, but we try to give as much lead time and advance notice as possible for a couple of things. The things that you mentioned, AJ, which is, hey, customer and partner, this gives you a chance to look at what's coming, to plan your investment areas, and to really try the solution. And of course, we have a very, very strong ISV ecosystem as well. And we work as closely with them as we can to say, this is what we're going to put into the core product. And so at times, that might conflict with what an ISV has built. It might conflict with what they're thinking of building. And we want to give as much advance notice as possible so that they can come up with alternate plans if they haven't invested in that area, or we can work through together and figure out what the best thing is for the customer and drive forward. So that's been a good addition to our team. It's been a good thing for us to kind of go back to and make sure that we're all on the same page all the way through a release cycle as well.
You're just wrapping up, I guess, now the preview that I mentioned earlier, and that's been going on for about 4 weeks. Is that what you're referring to there, or is there an even longer term sort of availability for ISVs and early adopters?
So yeah, what we do for our ISVs and some of our partners that are in the program is we do images. They can take builds all throughout a cycle so that they can react quickly because we do ship monthly. And so we want to make that as transparent as possible. Mm-hmm. So our ISVs have the option. They can take those builds daily if they would like. Most of them take them weekly or every other week. And then we kind of have that synchronization that allows them to see all the way through the cycle what we're building, what we're putting into the service so that they can react accordingly. For customers, that preview happens 2 months prior to our GA date. So in this case, it was August 1st, where we put customer preview out. Next time, it will be February 1st. And so we have a cadence there of not only can the ISVs take daily builds, but a customer should be able to see that a couple of months ahead of time for the code that's done, and they can plan their business.
Do you find that you're getting a lot of customers actively checking out putting a preview into a sandbox instance, and trying it out with their business data?
From our end, we're seeing more and more of it, and part of that, honestly, is I expect to actually ramp now because with this version and our sandboxes used to only allow you to do that against your our test data or our sample data. Now you can make a copy of your production data into your sandbox. And so that I believe will be kind of the tipping point for customers to do more of this. But I'm seeing it on a macro level. So I guess the question I'd like to ask back to AJ and see what he's seeing from his clients when it comes to that.
Yeah, not so much clients, but within our team, I'd say that I think the development side of our team, they do like and use the preview builds, the ones that are Docker based. We're seeing more of it. I think from our consulting team, there's probably less of an immediate interest because they're focused on helping customers on current builds and versions. Then we have certain people within our team who are more kind of like to live on the bleeding edge, either because of the role that they fill in the organization or just enthusiasts and evangelists for the product. And I think they start accessing it a little bit more once the sandbox uh, online sandboxes and cloud start allowing them to access the preview. I think the ones Chad you mentioned started coming out in August. So at different points in time, we feel like different people within our team start looking at it. We haven't yet developed a mechanism to track which of our customers are actively looking at or trying out the sandbox environments. We do foresee as a partner in the future having a much better relationship with our customers where we are encouraging them to get on these sandbox builds, trying out some of the extensions that they have so we can be more proactive than even having to wait for Microsoft to just send out that notification that started coming out lately saying you may have a compatibility issue with one or more of your extensions in the new build of Business Central. But we're still trying to find our feet a little bit in this discussion and at what point we start encouraging our customers to start looking at the sandboxes. But those preview builds have been very helpful. The Docker-based preview builds of containers have been very helpful for our development team.
I wanted to get to a few more topics that I think AJ and I had sort of put our heads together to ask you about, Chad. So, and AJ, I want to give you this one, but so, diving into the development platform a little more, did you want to talk a little more about sort of what the impact of changes on the AL to AL are? AJ, do you want to maybe reframe that question?
Right, and I think I'll frame it in the context of Jason mentioning blogs earlier. Right, I think we have a very passionate community around Business Central and Dynamics Nav, and so I think even within our community, some of the more prominent members, MVPs and former MVPs, have had this discussion around the extent of the changes to the development platform, and how it is impacting customers today. When it's time for them to upgrade, the extent of the effort, I think maybe a little bit of the who shares the burden of the effort, how well the changes are documented, and so on. So when I first saw that, the first thing that I did is I brought in our development manager, Sam Corona, and I said, "Hey, Sam, why don't you take a stab at this and tell me, who's right and who's overthinking this and who's not right?" And the answer was a more diplomatic, I think it's somewhere in the middle. So I'm thinking, Chad, maybe from your perspective, in less technical terms and in more plain spoken terms, can you explain? You've explained why the changes were made, but what are some of the types of changes to the development platform, and what type of tool sets are or are not available for developers today to help make existing apps compatible with the newer build of Business Central? And I'll add to it one other thing. As I understand, this impacts existing apps, both per tenant extensions and app source apps. So yeah, in that larger context, could you also answer that question and kind of just help inform the community on what's happening there?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and as you said, there is a lot of dialogue that's happening in Yammer and other groups as we've started to expose this. It's something we've talked about most of the last 6 months. We've tried to put it in the Docker images so that it can be seen, and we've held sessions on it as well. But it is, I mean, let's acknowledge up front, this is a pretty big architectural change for us and for the product. And as I mentioned, the reasons of why we're doing that and how we want to set ourselves up for the next number of years going forward. And fundamentally, we're moving to more modern tooling from a developer standpoint and from the way that you interact with the system by taking our base application and developing that into an application itself and then other apps that can plug into it. So what does it actually mean then? And what have we heard? I'm going to start first with ISVs. So we have built tools that allow you to take your code, your CAL code, and to run it through basically transformation into AL, and then you can test from there where you may or may not have issues. So those tools have been used by most of our ISVs to some degree, and we have many of those ISVs that have resubmitted their app onto the Wave 2 app source requirements that we have. So that is well underway, and the feedback we've gotten is that the tool takes care of anywhere from 80 to 90% of the work that needs to be done. You just run it through the tool, but then you may have to check for a couple of different tags, a couple of naming conventions, things like that. But on the horizontal level and on the lighter apps, it's been pretty seamless with minimal work there. But I won't pretend that it doesn't work. It is a change. It's an architecture change, and we need everybody will have to go through that, including the per tenant extensions. And so there again, you can run it through the same tooling. Should take just a little bit of time to run it through the tooling, and hopefully everything that you're calling into is in the same state that it was before. But it will affect both the apps from AppSource if they're a connected app. It should not affect those, or an add-on app, I'm sorry. It shouldn't affect connected apps that use our APIs or our web services. For the most part, those stay with the same contracts that we had before. And then per tenant extensions will need to be take a look at. But it's fairly well documented. We do have workshops recorded on it that you can go and visit and see and watch a quick series on that. And then there are a number of dev centers that we have across the world that can help if a person runs into any sort of issues and they want to speak to a dev center about it, or a partner or an ISV wants to help from a dev center. They've all been well versed and well trained in this area. So yeah, that's where we're at in terms of the architectural changes and what we're seeing. I did look right before this call. We're up to 436 apps that are in AppSource. So it's a pretty robust ecosystem of apps that are out there. And as I mentioned, we are geared up for approval on those apps as they make this conversion into Wave 2. We have many, many, many of them already being approved. We have many that have been approved and already are out on AppSource. And we're waiting for the next wave to kind of come in the next week or two as we've talked to all the ISVs that are out there. So that's where we're at on that.
Chad, one follow-up question, if I could. Do I understand correctly, then in the interim, we may have some apps that are ready for Wave 2, and then there are some apps in AppSource that are probably not yet there. So from a user experience perspective, is there a way for a user to easily identify which apps are or are not compatible based on whether they're in Wave 1 or Wave 2 yet? Because we know existing tenants probably won't get upgraded to Wave 2 for just a little bit. But as of today, all new tenants that people are signing on to, or new production environments that are being created, have the option to be on Wave 2. So just kind of maybe walk me through that. And it's okay if it's imperfect. I just kind of want to understand, I guess, how is it right now in the short term until everybody is on the latest and greatest?
Yeah, it's a very fair question, AJ. In the short term, it's imperfect. I'll start there. The way that AppSource works is we don't have a mechanism in AppSource to alert you to what version is compatible with Business Central. That validation actually happens in the Business Central service. So you have to choose the app, and then we run it through the validation, and we alert you as soon as possible whether that is or is not compatible with the version of Business Central you're using. So we need to kind of push through and get through this wave and get those apps updated. And certainly we've got feedback in, and we're working on better mechanisms for AppSource in order to see if that is compatible with the Wave 1 or the Wave 2 version. But right now, you would have to click on it, and we would then validate at that point in time if that app is ready for your version of Business Central or not.
Understood.
So changing topics a little bit, and this is, again, going back to me, who really has a much more limited understanding of the architecture of NAV and BC. But I've noticed a few blog posts that are talking about Business Central in terms of modules and announcing modules, the translation module, the assisted setup module. There's probably others I'm forgetting. Is that part of the larger architectural shift of the product? And is that accelerating with Wave 2?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It is actually introduced in Wave 2, and it is part of the architectural changes. And again, the theory and the thought there is that it allows us to componentize this a little bit more and be able to make changes in certain areas without impacting the entirety of the solution. So we can roll out, we can enhance, we can get to those commitments on the contracts, we can get to the commitments on deprecation over a year's time and non-breaking changes as we move forward. And so it was a major work effort on our engineers' part, but you will see that the base application has been kind of broken down into other applications. We'll package it up and ship it together, but you can call into, and we then will be able to go forward with different services that integrate in a pretty robust way, in more of a service architecture way than it has been in the past.
Is that so? Is it more something that's being set up now for future use? Is that a way to look at it? That
Yeah, I
modules...
would say this wave introduces that, and so it is there right now, and we will continue to work on other areas that we want to bring into that same methodology of architecture. But we took a big swing at the first system layer. And so that the base application is architected in this way, and then we'll continue that work as we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think AJ, actually, I'm just remembering last time. I think you and I did a podcast episode. I remember we chatted about this and said how we thought this was probably one of the more exciting sort of future possibilities of the product as it was being proposed. Maybe I forget when that was. 6 months ago or maybe a year ago. I think it was 6 months ago. And it was sort of already being sort of explained as a plan. So that's pretty interesting to see it kind of coming into reality here.
Right, and so I think if I can be allowed a moment to daydream here and kind of think pie in the sky, an interesting scenario which I'd love to see happen at some point in the future if it could is, while you're on the cloud, I know there's an element of platform purity that we have to adhere to, right? So we can't make changes to the base application, no matter the fact that it's now an AL and it's been broken down into smaller bits and pieces. But it would be great, and maybe it's possible today. I certainly don't understand that it is. It would be great if there would be a way for us to say, you know what, this little app in the native code, we'd just like to forego it altogether. And we have, as a partner or a developer, we have a better way to handle that. So just be able to deactivate one of those specific modules or apps that Microsoft has created that that's part of the larger Business Central application, and replace that with our own little bit and piece. And so now what we're talking about is not changing base apps altogether, but just deactivating one, putting ours in. And if there's ever a need for us to go back, then we can simply go ahead and roll that one out and revert back to, I guess, a Microsoft app for that particular module. So Chad, if you see where I'm coming from, I realize that comes with its own risks and dangers, but do you ever even see something like that happening? Is that even a conversation, or is that, boy, it just sounds interesting, but no, thank you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes, it's been a conversation. It's certainly not there in this wave of the release, but we understand kind of the reasons behind it and the opportunity that might come about if we were able to make that happen. So we don't have that as a commitment at this point in time for any of the foreseeable. While we work on the next semester, that's not in the next semester plan, but it is something we have talked about. It's certainly something that we envision down the road, but I don't have a timeline that I can share at this point.
All right. Do we want to touch on the support? The question of how support is exposed in the admin center, AJ? Is that?
Yeah. Of course. Okay. Yeah. So I think for a while I was under the impression that partners were the only way for a cloud customer to get a support ticket opened with Microsoft. And I think just as I was writing an article on the admin center for an upcoming NAVA magazine issue, I found that in the admin center, there was a way to get to support tickets. And from there, kind of start, halfway clicking through the process and seeing that there is a way to open a support ticket for Business Central, select an application area. And then I left it at that point that day. I came back the next day, decided to see how much further I could go. And that's when I realized that while you can kind of do a little bit of lookup on issues, but if you get to the point where you absolutely must open a support ticket, it asks for Premier Access. So I think for my curiosity and everybody else's, is that an indicator of a new level of kind of support, Premier Access support type that Business Central customers will be able to opt into? Or is that just kind of a carryover from other Dynamics products that I'm seeing there? And customer led support tickets are not yet a thing that's going to be possible in the Business Central ecosystem.
It's a great question. Is again, AJ. I don't think. What I know is that we are committed to the partner first in this environment. And so everything we've done, and we have done a lot of work around supportability. We certainly heard partners ask us and say, hey, this is an area that we need to focus on, and there has to be a better way for us to work together between Microsoft and the VAR or Microsoft and the ISV when it comes to Business Central. So our design and our intent, we did use some tooling that was available from other products, which is likely what you're seeing when you talk about Premier Support. But our efforts and our key focus was still on the VAR. And so what we've done was within the Tenant Admin Center, whoever you have access to or whoever has access, which is usually the delegated admin, maybe you allow the super user into there. But in the Tenant Admin Center is the area you can set up other production instances, you can set up sandboxes, and now you can create a support request. So that support request does go routing through and directly into our support team because there is a drop down now using what the Power Platform team uses. We've used that same infrastructure, so we direct out there. But you can choose Business Central, you can choose an area of Business Central. And interestingly, what we have found in a lot of the analysis of our support inquiries is there is a level of self-service or solution solving that can happen by the VAR if only pointed in the right direction and pointed to the right videos or right documentation. One term you could use a deflection, but essentially as you enter that support request and you type in what you're looking for, you can click a button and say, help me find information about this. And we're going to serve up whether it be help documents, whether it be videos, we're going to serve up content that others have found helpful in sorting the issue so that you don't have to log a ticket. You don't have to wait for a response from support. You can solve it on your own. If that's not possible, if those tools that we bring forward at that moment are not solving the issue, you simply carry on and you create that support ticket that gets routed directly into our Microsoft support team for Business Central, and then you have all the correspondence back and forth. Now, one other thing you can do, there's two other things you can do in the Tenant Admin Center. Because VARs and or ISVs are the primary support vehicle and the support contact for their customers, you can set up whatever path you want for the VAR to be the support contact. So you can create the email address that you want the customer to send their inquiries to. Then when they go under their help button within Business Central, they see that information and they can create a support request directly to you as the partner, which then you could go into the Tenant Admin Center, and if you can't sort or want to connect with Microsoft, you follow the steps I just mentioned about creating a support ticket through the Tenant Admin Center. So that handles things that are non-production outage issues and ways that you can get a more thorough and streamlined support process. We've also introduced the ability to notify us of a production outage. Now, I'll start by saying we have continued to build a great amount of telemetry that we expect we will know before the customer knows if there is an issue as far as our production being inaccessible. We can't catch all of it, and we might miss a thing or two. And so what we've done is within the Tenant Admin Center, you as the VAR or the delegated admin, you can go in and say, I have a tenant that cannot access the system. It's a production outage issue. And when you enter that production outage issue, there's two choices you have to make. One is they simply cannot log into Business Central, The second is any of the connected apps that they're trying to use, meaning the web service or APIs are broken or not accessible. So those are the two areas that we have right now for production outage. And when you enter that information, you enter the tenant information, and you submit that, that comes directly to us in engineering. It copies it also as a support request. So it creates a support ticket, but it creates an alert to our on-call engineers that says, we've got a problem. This tenant is down. And that dramatically is improving our turnaround time to get that tenant back up and running. So those are three of the things that we've done around the supportability area to really enable a better service experience and a better self-help experience, and really get the customers back on their way to doing business and getting their primary work done, versus Business Central being something that is not helpful at that moment in time.
That production outage feature that snuck up on me, I saw that too earlier in the week, and I do think there's a lot of value to it.
It was interesting. The very first time, and we had just put it out there, and the very first one we got in, within 1 minute, we had acknowledged the incident. So it's effective. It works. And again, it's for production outage issues, and then we share that correspondence with support so that we can get everybody working on it, get everybody back up and running.
Nice. Jason, do we want to talk about production instances at all? I figure that's a good topic to get to as well, since we were talking about instances and outages. So Chad, I had some opportunity firsthand to play with this today, the ability to create additional production instances and in different localizations. Is there any information that's been published, or is there a timeline for when Microsoft will inform partners and customers what cost, if any, may be incurred by whipping up additional tenants or additional, rather, environments for production?
Yeah,
is that something you're comfortable talking about right now?
Yeah. So that one we're going to cover more at directions. So we should have a little bit more information around any of the costs that are associated with that. I'll talk mostly about the feature for the time being. And this was a very, very popular request, certainly for customers that are in multiple countries or have entities in multiple countries. The ability to have a single Azure Active Directory account, but have instances of Business Central within their different countries, meaning the localization is proper for Austria versus Netherlands versus the US. And that's available now. And so this is one that finished right towards the end. We worked very, very hard on that. So when you talk about some of the other documentation and things that need to be settled out, we're kind of putting the finishing touches on that before we go to our directions conference only a week away. But it is a popular request, and what it allows you to do is you can create multiple instances or multiple production instances within a country if you need them in the US, or what we see more often is those, again, that have a person or a user or one AAD tenancy that they want to have different Business Central instances for the different countries with all the proper localization functionality in each country. And that's what that enables you to do with the multiple environments that we've introduced.
AJ, why are you particularly interested in that?
Well, as a partner, we had a few scenarios like that. I think at least two scenarios like that where we had multinational clients, and I think we kind of struggled with having to have each of those countries be set up in a separate Office 365 tenant in that respective country. And then, I think once you do that, then you have two different logins. People from one country have to use one login. People from another country have to use another login. And then you occasionally have some users who need access to both. So I think just having multiple environments in one tenant solves that, and especially having support for different countries further solves it. But I think before we go out and scream from the rooftops, we want to understand what, if any, cost implications arise. How many such production tenants can you have within an environment? Is this more size driven? Is this more driven by the number of production tenants and so on? So, cautiously very happy about the fact that the feature is out there. I think now it's just before we start going and evangelizing our customers and prospects, we want to make sure we're fully aware of everything related to it.
All right, excellent. The only other thing I have, Chad, is just around feedback and both how the community is giving you feedback and how you are sort of managing and reviewing it internally. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know there's the ideas site, and I think I've heard that
Mhm.
that's really gaining momentum. But can you tell us a little more? I'm sure that comes up as people are, like, as AJ's saying, you start to look at features and new capabilities, and obviously that's probably top of mind at a time like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a continual effort for us. So we look at the ideas site every week as a program management team and product management team. So we look at that constantly and we start to incorporate that into our engineering plans. I believe, and we're just putting the final numbers together, but I believe of the net new features that are coming out in Wave 2, around 40% of those were directly from the ideas site and from either customers or partners voting on things that they wanted to see in the product. So we take it extremely seriously. We understand that that is the best way to help customers improve their business, to improve the way that we handle our scenarios and the way that you can get through your day in a more efficient way. So it's a huge part of our culture. It's a huge part of the way we work. It's not just a site and lip service. It's evident in the product feature list that you see when we have about 40% of the features that have come directly from that feedback from customers and partners.
All right, excellent. AJ, did you have something else?
Yes. So as we're having this conversation, one of the things that I thought about was common data service, and the Power Platform. I know Business Central has some good integration with Power BI already. I think quite a few of our customers use Power BI. But when we move to the topic of Microsoft Flow or Power Apps from the Power Platform, we realize there are integration use case scenarios, but it does seem to be a little more limited. And from prior conversations with some of your colleagues, Chad, I recall hearing that maybe improvements to that will come more as Business Central is better aligned with the common data service. I think it probably also impacts or affects cross Dynamics 365 integration into apps like Dynamics 365 for project services automation, or some of the non-standard, non-sales Dynamics 365 tools. So I guess that's where I feel like there's a real opportunity, and I would feel today maybe that's where we're lacking. Sometimes we get smacked over the head by prospects because they look at all these Dynamics 365 tools and have an expectation that they'll just work natively together. That'll be one of those, it just works. So I realize it's somewhere on your roadmap. Are you at liberty to maybe talk about how, when, where it kind of that fits into the larger vision for the types of improvements you're bringing to the product? So common data service maybe is the best way to aggregate that, or is the best way to summarize that particular need and opportunity.
Yeah, I think there's the common data service, and then of course there's the Azure Data Lake, which a lot of the Power BI is running off of for historical data. So we have actively looked at those areas. We're working very closely with our finance and operations product line and team. We're in the same organization, and so that's been one of the real attributes or values of being together in an organization is we can share those learnings. They are taking the lead on integrating a little more quickly than we have on Business Central for both CDS and Azure Data Lake. But it is something that's on our radar. It's something that we're following how they're going about that work, and we're starting to put our plans in place. So I don't have a commitment at this point that I can share, but know that it is an active topic of conversation here and an active part of what we are looking at and planning for Business Central as we go forward.
Yeah, there was just a blog series on our way today that Azure Data Lake storage Gen 2 can get ingest, I guess you'd say, Business Central data, and I think it got a pretty good response. I remember reading it and then seeing some pretty positive comments afterward that people were pretty excited to see that there was some guidance on that at least. So it's probably a good sign for the future.
Yes, excellent.
Jason, one other thing, if I have a moment more, Chad, earlier today when we were talking about changes to the development platform, I don't think I've heard it referred to as AL 3.0, but is that kind of where we are? Is that a fair question to ask, or is that just basically a major shift, or how would you categorize that? Where we are in the development platform lifecycle?
We haven't called it anything clever like that. In terms of a naming, I'll have to take that one back and see what the team thinks. But it is a pretty big shift for us for this version. We felt really good about where we were at on extensions. We feel really good about what we've done for eventing. There's certainly more eventing that we can do, and we take those requests quite frequently and add to the solution set. But this is really the big shift for us on the base application and breaking that in from a system, a platform system and app layers. So I don't know. We didn't come up with any catchy terminology or T-shirts for that. So
and here's why, right?
Oh, I don't know.
and here's why. It's not so much is there a marketing name for it, but I do believe that there's some clarity that the user community on current releases of Business Central is going to seek to understand that this is an anomaly, that this level of impact will not be felt with every single release wave. And so I think, how do we convey that, right? That this is not the norm, this is the exception. And I think as a partner, sometimes having a marketing label like that from the publisher helps us communicate that a little bit better. Because otherwise, how do we convey where you're going from and what you're going to, and how that journey continues? So,
yeah, that's great feedback. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I can think of is just maybe a bit of a look forward. There's, I think, two pretty substantial in-person events. There's also a big virtual event push from Microsoft this month, Chad. I guess are those the places that people should be looking to dive into more detail? Am I missing anything?
No, absolutely. We have the VAR and ISV event in Europe next week. It's in Vienna. It's called Directions EMEA. We have over nearly 2,500 people that are going to be in attendance for that. There we'll go into great depth on the Wave 2 release. It is, again, geared towards VARs and ISVs, so we'll share some of the ways that you can administer, that you can handle support, that you can do the things that you need to do from that perspective. Immediately following that, the week of October 16th, in fact, I think it's October 16th through the 18th, is the User Group Summit, and that's in Orlando, Florida. That is primarily end users of the system, and there we will share information on Business Central, both on-prem and the SaaS versions. It's a great opportunity for users to get together and talk about how to enhance their business, and we'll have a keynote from Microsoft on Wednesday morning that covers all of our Dynamics solutions all up, as well as exclusively a general session for Business Central on Thursday afternoon, where you can learn about Wave 2 and our go-forward strategy on Business Central. So those are two big in-person events that are coming up, as well as what you talked about with some of the virtual launches.
Right, I'm just looking here. There's a virtual launch event on October 10th. 8 a.m. Pacific. So for anyone not traveling, probably a good way to, again, if it's like previous ones, probably a pretty good amount of detail on various, on Business Central, but also a lot of other business apps that are part of this Wave 2 for 2019. All right. Well, this has been great. I think we raced through almost an hour here of conversation. A lot more to learn. Chad, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It was fun.
Yeah, it was. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all that listen into this, for your commitment to Business Central. This is a journey that we are really enjoying. I hope you're getting some enjoyment out of it, but really hoping that you're getting the value out of our work here and out of the collaborative nature that we're going about this work. So look forward to talking to more of you soon, but really appreciate and thank you for your commitment to Business Central.
Excellent. And AJ, thank you as well for being here, for asking so many great questions.
Indeed, Jason. Yeah, this I know I'm on the podcast, but I felt like this was just an amazing one-off opportunity to be a co-interviewer with you, right? Interviewing Chad, and hopefully some of the questions that I had were not just of unique interest to me or our organization, but to the partner and the user community at large. But yeah, thank you, Jason, and once again, thank you, Chad.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks to Chad and AJ for joining me today. If you have any comments, you can reach out by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.